Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending the 2024 Remembrance Day program. My name is Captain Craig Bird, and I'm the commanding officer of the Army Cadet Corps in Estevan, as well as a Legion member. I would like to show a photo presentation on my recent trip to France for the 80th anniversary of the Juno landings, Operation Neptune, or D-Day, that took place on June 6th, 2024. I can hear some of you saying, "What? Operation Neptune?" Well, Operation Neptune was the amphibious landing portion of Operation Overlord, which in turn was the plan for the invasion of the Normandy area. All of the photos were taken by myself, my wife Tina, and a friend, Master Warrant Officer Mike Brown, who is also a Canadian Forces historian from Ontario. As it is also the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force, I will also add some Air Force information to pay tribute to their contribution of the invasion. There is an air plan map for the airborne assault and air coverage of the Allied forces. Allied forces and routes across the Channel in blue, and the German units and controlled areas in red. Here is another air map for transportation routes for airborne forces. Areas in the center for fighter coverage and screening, as well as areas at the bottom for a photo reconnaissance area and a tactical reconnaissance area. Just for information, the British and Canadian airborne operations were called Operation Tonga. We arrived in Paris, France on the 4th of June 2024 to start our adventure. After our arrival, we promptly left the airport and went to the Gare Saint-Lazare train station, where we boarded the train to go to the Normandy coast. Some of the views from the windows of the train were spectacular, seeing poppies growing along the train tracks. Looking out into the countryside and seeing the fields of crops, just like you would see here. We arrived in a small town called Bernay and had a short stopover where we had to switch trains. At the train station, Tina looked impressed as we waited, but didn't have enough time to look around before our next train ride. We arrived in Caen, our final leg of the train ride. We had some time to look around and saw some of the old architecture and cathedrals in the city, as well as monuments to the Canadians for the liberation of the city. The next day, we traveled to Bretteville, where the ceremony took place to commemorate the liberation of that town. The town center has a central area called the Place des Canadiens. Located there is the town's cenotaph, plaques commemorating the war losses, and now a statue dedicated to the Regina Rifle Regiment. Walking around the town prior to the ceremony, you could see the welcoming attitude of the people visiting and the Canadian flags all over. You could also see the American influence through the artwork displayed on some of the businesses. When we got back to the Place des Canadiens, there was a lot of VIPs from around the world, as this special tribute was paid to the attending Second World War veterans. Here you can see the statue and the royal flag ready to be flown, as Princess Anne was to be in attendance. Here you see Second World War veteran Jim Spence on the right and General Richard Romer. Ready on parade was the contingent of Royal Regina Rifle members. The Royal Canadian Air Force Band was also there. To remember the First Nations and Métis soldiers that had served with the unit, there was a Master Warrant Officer from the North Saskatchewan Regiment representing them. We were fortunate to be seated with other guests and could observe the entire program. In the background, the town cenotaph and statue could be seen. The moment of truth. Princess Anne of Edinburgh and the Chief of Defence Staff, General Eyre, along with other VIPs, being led to the podium. She had an opportunity to inspect the troops and took the opportunity to speak with most of them. She also took the time to speak with other VIPs and gave a wonderful speech about the dedication of the Canadian soldiers and the Regina Rifles. After the formal portion of the ceremony, there was an opportunity to look at the monument and the statue. I was fortunate to speak with D-Day veteran Bill Seafried and take his picture in front of the statue. I also got some photos with our veteran Jim Spence with the Regina Rifles camp flag and the City of Estevan flag. I was able to get a picture of myself with Jim and his son Daryl, who is also a Canadian Forces veteran. Tina and I were also photographed with the statue. The plaque says it all. The cenotaph in Brettville lists those lost to both the First and Second World Wars, and a Canadian flag flies proudly at the monument. The plaque on the left reads, "Free men from all nations remember that in June 1944, brave soldiers from the Regina Rifles Canadian Regiment died for your freedom in this village." The other side is the same, but in French. At the end of the day, we took a car ride back to Caen, where we caught the train to go up to the coast to Trouville. This was our base of operations for the next few days. June the 6th, 2024, Juno Beach at Courcelles-sur-Mer. A separate viewing area was set up for everyone, as a secure area was made for the VIPs and heads of state. Here's an aerial view of the Juno Beach area. Another view facing the VIP area. The Canadian Skyhawks performed before the ceremony. Looking west, the other side of the canal towards the Juno Center. Some of the security forces in the area watching out for trouble. French citizens loved that there were Canadians there and wanted pictures with us. Facing west towards the Juno Center, from across the canal, watching the students leaving the ceremony. Plaque on the east side of the canal talking about D-Day and the Sherman tank that was recovered from the ocean 27 years after the assault. The Sherman tank was a duplex drive system that had a collapsible canvas screen and propellers that propelled the tank through the water to the beach. The tank has unit plaques attached to the hull that represent the Canadian units that attacked on D-Day. Canada House. Bernay-sur-Mer. It wasn't built by Canadians, and Canadians don't own it. But on June 6, 1944, it became part of a Canadian military history. On that day, it was the first house to be liberated during Operation Overlord, the Allied military operation to try to liberate France. On June 6, 1977, members of the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada Regiment and their relatives placed a bronze plaque in front of the house. The motto of their regiment, "In Pace Paratus," is in the heading. It's the Latin phrase meaning "in peace, prepared." The plaque reads, "This house was liberated at first light on D-Day, June 6, 1944, by the men of the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada, who were the first Canadians to land on this beach. It may have very well been the first house on French soil liberated by seaborne Allied forces. Within sight of this house, over 100 men of the Queen's Own Rifles were killed or wounded in the first few minutes of the landings. We will remember them." One of the many bunkers that still stand on the beach, facing east. We performed a small ceremony on the beach in front of the Juno Center, placing a photo and Canadian flags and having the Estevan city flag above the photos. Comrade Frosty's father, Gerard Forrest, landed on D-Day and survived the war. We planted his issue cap badge in the sand. The center picture is Arnold Spence, Jim's brother, who also landed with the Regina Rifles on D-Day, and Anthony Blondo, who was also with the Regina Rifles and landed on D-Day but was killed in the liberation of Caen. A short video of the beach from east to west that was filmed by my friend and fellow veteran, Mike Brown. some pictures of the beach. One of the surviving German bunkers on the beach in front of the Juno Center. This house is the house from the only surviving Canadian Army Film and Photo Unit film footage taken on D-Day, 1944. This is the plaque in front of the house. Photo map of the Juno area with the Nan and Mike sectors shown. The canal can be seen in the center. The entrance to the German bunker on the Juno Beach site. Some interior pictures of the bunker and photos showing the French workers building the defenses. Here are some of the anti-tank defenses that were placed on the beach to prevent the invasion. I'm standing beside one of the diamonds to show the size of the obstacle. A 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft defense gun. A plaque beside the Juno Center. It reads, 6 June 1944. From these Normandy beaches, traced by our Canadian liberators, begins the Remembrance Way. The multinational monument at Courcelles. We traveled to Bienfait Canadian War Cemetery. The men who fell on the beaches and in the bitter bridgehead battles are buried in Bienfait Canadian War Cemetery, which, despite its name, is near the village of Rivière. The cemetery contains 2,049 headstones enclosed by pines and maples. These mark the dead of the 3rd Canadian Division and contain the graves of 15 airmen. We visited many graves, and here is the grave of Anthony Blondeau. We planted flags and left his picture. 1939 to 1945. The land on which this cemetery stands is a gift of the French people for the perpetual resting place of the sailors, soldiers, and airmen who are honored here. I would like to thank Lyle and Curtis McGillivary for their help and hard work in putting this presentation together. Thank you for attending this year's Remembrance Ceremony. We will remember them.